Aaron thought his bank account gave him the right to treat people like footstools. But when he sat down at the Gilded Table that Tuesday evening and decided to use a foreign language as a weapon to humiliate his waitress, he had no idea he was walking into a trap of his own making. He spoke to her in rapid, complex German, laughing with his date as he mocked Nancy's skin tone, her intelligence, her profession, certain she couldn't understand a single word. He wanted to see her squirm. He wanted her to feel small. Instead, he got a response that silenced the entire restaurant and left his date walking out the door alone. Wait until you hear what Nancy said back to him, and the secret identity she was hiding behind that apron. This isn't just a story about a rude customer getting what he deserved. This is the day a billionaire learned that some people are too expensive to insult, and that the quiet woman refilling your water glass might just be the most powerful person in the room. Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The Gilded Table wasn't the kind of restaurant where you just walked in off the street. Reservations were made months in advance, sometimes through connections alone. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in imported Italian linen. The air smelled like truffle oil, aged wine, and old money. This was where tech moguls celebrated acquisitions, where senators dined in corners they thought were private, where discretion was as much on the menu as the $40 appetizers. Nancy had been on her feet for 11 hours straight. This was her second shift. She'd opened at a diner across town that morning, gone home just long enough to change into her black slacks and white button-down, and clocked in here at 4. Now, at 7:30, she could feel the ache settling deep into her lower back. She paused by the server station, dabbing her forehead with a napkin, and glanced at her watch. If she finished by 10, she could still make it. "Hey, heads up." Marcus, another server, appeared beside her, his voice low. "Table 12 just sat down. Guy's got a reputation. Friend of mine at Lumiere said he made one of their servers cry last month. Just be careful with that one, okay?" Nancy straightened her shoulders and smoothed her apron. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. How bad could he be? She picked up 2 menus, took a breath, and headed toward table 12. She had no idea what was coming.
Aaron Westmore didn't walk into rooms. He arrived. Tonight was no exception. His suit was Tom Ford, midnight blue with a cut so precise it looked like it had been painted onto his frame. The watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe, the kind that costs more than most people's cars. But it wasn't the clothes or the accessories that announced his presence. It was the way he moved, the way he looked past people rather than at them, the casual entitlement that came from never once in his 34 years having to hear the word no and mean it. Across from him sat Carrie, his date for the evening. She was beautiful in that carefully constructed way, salon-fresh hair, designer dress, makeup applied with surgical precision. But there was something fragile in her posture, the way she kept glancing at Aaron for cues, like a student hoping she'd study the right material for the test. At the host stand, the maitre d' had stiffened almost imperceptibly when Aaron gave his name. In the kitchen, a line cook who'd worked at 3 other high-end restaurants had muttered, "Oh, that guy," with a knowing shake of his head. The tester, they called him, the one who believed that if you couldn't handle his standards, you didn't belong in luxury service. Aaron's philosophy was simple. The world had an order to it. There were people who built empires and people who served drinks to empire builders. There were those who commanded rooms and those who cleaned them. The help should know their place, and if they didn't, well, it was practically a public service to remind them. Tonight, he planned to do exactly that. Nancy approached the table with a professional smile. "Good evening. Welcome to the Gilded Table." Nancy set the menus down gently, one in front of each guest. "My name's Nancy, and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I start you off with something to drink, or would you like a moment to?" Aaron's hand came up, a dismissive wave like he was shooing away a fly. His eyes stayed fixed on the wine list, then drifted to Carrie with an amused smirk. Wir hätten gern eine Flasche von Ihrem 2015 Chateau Margaux und bringen Sie uns danach die Vorspeisenkarte, falls Sie überhaupt verstehen, was ich sage. The words came fast, technical, pronounced with the clipped precision of someone who'd learned the language in expensive classrooms, not living rooms. Carrie let out a nervous laugh, glancing between Aaron and Nancy. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, clearly uncomfortable but trying to play along. Nancy's expression didn't change. She pulled a notepad from her apron pocket, clicked her pen, and waited. When Aaron paused, she said calmly, in English, "I'll get that started for you. Anything else?" Aaron exchanged a look with Carrie, eyebrows raised, a silent "see?" He had no idea the trap had already closed around him. Nancy returned with the wine, presented the bottle, and poured a taste for Aaron. He swirled it, sniffed, sipped, then nodded his approval without a word. As she filled both glasses, he leaned back in his chair and launched into his order. "Also, ich hätte gern die Jakobsmuscheln aus Vorspeise." Then, without missing a beat, "Obwohl ich bezweifle, dass sie versteht, was Jakobsmuscheln bedeutet. Schau sie an, sie starrt wie ein verwehtes Tier." Nancy wrote on her pad, her pen moving steadily across the paper. Carrie's smile had frozen on her face. Aaron continued, gaining momentum. "Danach das Rinderfilet, medium rare, nicht dass ich erwarte, dass sie den Unterschied kennt, und die Trüffelrisotto für die Dame." After that, the beef tenderloin, medium rare, not that I expect that she knows the difference, and the truffle risotto for the lady. He paused, took a sip of wine, then added with a chuckle, "Wenigstens ist die Einrichtung hier schöner als das Personal." At least the decor here is prettier than the staff. "Medium rare on the filet," Nancy confirmed in English, still writing, "and would you like the risotto as your entry, ma'am?" Carrie nodded quickly. "Yes, thank you." Aaron was warming up now, his voice louder, playing to an audience of one, but increasingly aware of the tables around them. "Stell dir vor, mit Mitte 20 als Kellnerin zu enden. Das muss das Höchste sein, was sie je erreichen wird." Imagine peaking as a waitress in your mid-20s. That must be the highest she'll ever achieve. A woman at the neighboring table glanced over, her conversation with her husband pausing mid-sentence. 2 tables away, an older gentleman frowned, leaning towards his companion and whispering something.
Nancy asked, in perfect professional English, "Any allergies or dietary restrictions I should be aware of?" Aaron smiled wider. This was going exactly as planned, the confused little waitress scribbling away, completely oblivious. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. As Nancy walked away toward the kitchen, Carrie leaned forward, her voice a strained whisper. "Aaron, maybe we should just order normally? I think people are—" "Relax," Aaron said, reaching across to pat her hand with patronizing affection. "I do this everywhere. It's a test. If they can't handle the pressure of a customer with standards, they shouldn't be working at a place like this." He took another sip of wine, his eyes following Nancy across the dining room. "Besides, you want to know what I actually said?" Carrie didn't answer, but he continued anyway, lowering his voice just enough to seem conspiratorial, while still being audible to nearby tables. "I told her she looks like a confused animal, that she's probably peaked in life." He laughed, a sound that carried too far in the hushed elegance of the restaurant. "She probably thinks I'm complimenting her. They always do. They hear the foreign language and assume you're being sophisticated. It's like speaking in code right in front of them." Carrie's eyes dropped to her lap. She twisted her napkin between her fingers. At the server station, Nancy input the order into the computer system. For just a fraction of a second, so brief you might have missed it if you weren't watching closely, her jaw tightened. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. Then she exhaled slowly through her nose, completed the order, and turned back toward the dining room. She was still human, after all, still a person who could be hurt, but she was also something else, something Aaron hadn't bothered to consider. The restaurant manager, a silver-haired man named Vincent, materialized at table 12. "Good evening, Mr. Westmore. I trust everything is to your satisfaction?" Aaron barely glanced up. "Fine, we're fine. And your server, Nancy, she's been attentive?" "She's adequate," Aaron said with a wave of his hand, already bored with the conversation. "You can go."
Vincent's lips pressed into a thin line, but he nodded professionally. "Please let us know if you need anything." His eyes found Nancy across the room, and something passed between them, a silent understanding. The show was far from over. Nancy returned with a basket of warm bread and a small dish of herb-infused olive oil. As she set them on the table, Aaron was mid-sentence in German. "Siehst du isi Hände? Arbeiterhände, rau und gewöhnlich. Man kann immer erkennen, wer für sein Geld arbeiten muss." Nancy's hands, those same hands, placed the breadbasket down with practiced grace. Hands that had, yes, scrubbed dishes and carried trays, but also hands that had shaken the hand of a German chancellor at a state dinner when she was 16. Hands that typed a thesis on post-Cold War European integration that her professors called doctoral-level work. Hands that held her father's when he was stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Berlin, where they'd lived for 8 years. What Aaron didn't know, what he couldn't have known because he'd never bothered to look past his own assumptions, was that Nancy Chen wasn't just a waitress. She was a PhD candidate at Georgetown, specializing in international relations with a focus on European diplomatic history. She'd grown up in embassy housing, attending international schools, speaking German at breakfast, French at diplomatic functions, and English at home. She was 3 months from defending her dissertation. She worked at the Gilded Table and the diner across town because the non-profit she'd founded, an organization that provided after-school programs in underserved communities, needed funding that grant money couldn't cover. She worked these shifts because she believed in leading by example and understanding all levels of society, not just the one she'd been born into. And right now, in this moment, she was making a choice. She could end this. She could respond in German, watch his face collapse, and walk away victorious. But something made her wait. Maybe it was the thesis she was writing about power dynamics. Maybe it was curiosity about how far he'd actually go. Or maybe she just wanted him to dig the hole deeper, so when he finally fell in, everyone would see. "Your appetizers will be out shortly," she said in English, her voice steady. Aaron smirked at Carrie. "See? Completely clueless." Stay with me. What happens next will make your jaw drop. Drop a comment below. What would you do in Nancy's position?
20 minutes later, Nancy emerged from the kitchen carrying their entrees on a large tray. The scallops were seared to golden perfection. The beef tenderloin rested in a pool of red wine reduction. The risotto gleamed with freshly shaved truffles. She approached the table with the same professional composure she'd maintained all evening. As she began setting down the plates, Aaron leaned back, wineglass in hand, and continued his performance. "Weißt du, Carrie, Leute wie Sie sind der Grund, warum die Gesellschaft eine Hierarchie braucht," he said, gesturing toward Nancy with his glass. "You know, Carrie, people like her are the reason society needs hierarchy." His voice carried across the nearby tables now, no longer even pretending at discretion. Then he went further. "Diese dunkelhäutigen Servicekräfte, sie gehören hierher, nicht wahr? An ihren Platz, wo sie hingehören." These dark-skinned service workers, they belong here, don't they? In their place, where they belong. The terminology he used was old-fashioned, the kind you'd find in history books about eras best forgotten, words that carried the weight of centuries of ugliness. The table next to them had gone completely silent. Carrie's face drained of color. "Carrie, maybe we should just—" "I'm making a point," he cut her off sharply, not even looking at her. His eyes were on Nancy, watching for a reaction, feeding off what he believed was her ignorance. Nancy placed the beef tenderloin in front of him, slowly, each movement deliberate, controlled. Then the risotto in front of Carrie, then the scallops between them to share. Her face remained perfectly neutral, but anyone paying close attention might have noticed the slightest change in her breathing, the way her shoulders squared just a fraction more, the subtle shift in her posture from service worker to something else entirely. "Is there anything else I can get for you right now?" she asked in English, her voice calm as still water. Aaron smiled, raised his glass in a mock toast. "Das wäre alles. Danke, Schätzchen." "That would be all. Thanks, sweetheart." He had finally crossed the line from which there was no return. 40 minutes later, Aaron had finished his meal and most of the wine bottle.
He was feeling pleased with himself, relaxed, ready to cap off the evening. He raised his hand to signal Nancy, who was attending to another table. When she arrived, he didn't look up from his phone. Die Rechnung bitte. Und sagen Sie dem Koch, dass das Essen mittelmäßig war, genau wie der Service. The check, please, and tell the chef the food was mediocre, just like the service. One final insult for the road, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. Nancy stood there for a moment, the leather bill folder in her hand. Then she smiled, not the professional server's smile she'd worn all evening, but something else, something knowing. When she spoke, her voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a bell. Selbstverständlich, mein Herr. Ich hoffe, das Essen war trotz der bescheidenen Gesellschaft angenehm. Of course, sir. I hope the meal was pleasant despite the modest company. The German that came from Nancy's mouth wasn't just fluent, it was perfect. Hochdeutsch, High German, the refined aristocratic dialect spoken in diplomatic circles and academic institutions. Her accent was Berlin pure, her syntax flawless, her word choice sophisticated in a way that made Aaron's earlier German sound like a tourist reading from a phrasebook. The effect was instantaneous. Aaron's head snapped up, the color drained from his face as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, then closed. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have paused. Nancy continued, her voice calm, measured, devastating. Sie haben mich als verwirrtes Tier bezeichnet. Sie sagten, ich hätte Arbeiterhände, rau und gewöhnlich. Sie meinten, Menschen wie ich bräuchten eine Hierarchie, zu wissen, wo wir hingehören. You called me a confused animal. You said I had workers' hands, rough and common. You suggested people like me need hierarchy to know where we belong. Each word landed like a hammer blow. Her vocabulary was more sophisticated than his, her grammatical structures more complex. This wasn't just German, this was the German of someone who'd been educated in it, lived in it, dreamed in it. For those wondering, Hochdeutsch is the standardized form of German used in formal settings, education, and media. Nancy's command of it, her flawless accent and elevated vocabulary, immediately signaled to anyone who knew the language that she wasn't just fluent, she was educated at the highest levels. Meanwhile, Aaron's German, though functional, had the markers of someone who'd learned it in classrooms, not embassies. Carrie had both her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She was sliding down in her seat, trying to disappear. But Nancy wasn't finished, not even close.
Nancy switched to English, her tone perfectly professional, as if she'd simply been confirming a dessert order. I'll be right back with your bill, Mr. Westmore. The use of his real name, his full actual name, made Aaron flinch like he'd been slapped. He'd made the reservation under A. West, a habit he'd developed after one too many Google searches of his family name led to uncomfortable recognition. But she knew. She'd known all along. Nancy disappeared toward the server station. Aaron sat frozen, his mind racing. Carrie stared at him, her expression somewhere between fury and disbelief. "Aaron, what just—" "Not now," he hissed. 3 minutes later, Nancy returned with the leather bill folder. She set it on the table, then leaned in slightly, her voice discreet, the way servers do when delivering potentially embarrassing news. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Westmore, but your card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Aaron's hand shot to his wallet. "That's impossible. That card has no limit. Run it again." "I ran it twice, sir. The same result both times." He pulled out a second card, black and heavy, the kind given only to people with 8-figure net worths. "Try this one." Nancy took it, walked to the server station, returned 30 seconds later. "I'm afraid this one was also declined." Aaron's face had gone from pale to red. "This is absurd. There's clearly something wrong with your system." "There's nothing wrong with the system," Nancy said, her voice still calm, still professional. But now she wasn't whispering. The tables around them could hear every word. "I grew up in Berlin, Mr. Westmore. My father was the U.S. Deputy Ambassador to Germany for 8 years. I spent my childhood attending international schools, diplomatic functions, state dinners. I'm fluent in German, French, and English, not because I took classes, but because that was my life." Aaron sank back into his chair, his expensive suit suddenly looking 2 sizes too big.
I'm currently completing my PhD in International Relations at Georgetown. My dissertation focuses on socio-economic power dynamics in post-industrial societies. I work here and at a diner across town because the nonprofit I run, the one your father supports, serves kids who don't have the advantages you were born with. I work these jobs to fund programs that matter and to stay grounded in the reality that most people live in. She paused, and for the first time all evening, there was something almost sad in her expression. You thought language was a weapon, something to use against people you perceived as beneath you. For me, it's a bridge. It's how we connect, how we understand each other, how we build a better world. That's the difference between us, Mr. Westmore. You use what you have to make others feel small. I use what I have to lift people up. Vincent, the manager, appeared at Aaron's side. Mr. Westmore, I'm going to have to ask you to settle your bill and leave. Your reservation privileges here have been permanently revoked. Aaron fumbled for his wallet, pulled out a stack of cash with shaking hands, and threw it on the table. Too much, probably double what he owed. He stood, not looking at Nancy, not looking at anyone. As he reached the door, it opened. Carrie stood there, her coat already on. She looked at him with something like pity. I speak German too, by the way. Spent a semester abroad in Munich. I understood every word you said tonight. I just wanted to see how far you'd go. Then she turned and walked into the night, leaving Aaron standing alone in the doorway. If you're loving this, smash that like button and share this story. People need to hear this.
As the door closed behind Aaron, something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire dining room was applauding. An elderly woman at table 7 stood up, walked over to Nancy, and pressed a $50 bill into her hand. "For your foundation, dear," she said warmly. 2 other tables followed suit, leaving extra cash specifically for Nancy with notes scrawled on napkins, "For the nonprofit," and "Keep doing what you're doing." Nancy accepted them with quiet gratitude, but as she walked back to the server station, Marcus caught a glimpse of her face. Her hands were trembling slightly. Her eyes were bright. She stepped into the back hallway, just for a moment, and allowed herself a long, shaky breath. She was still human, after all. Still someone who'd just been insulted, demeaned, reduced to a caricature. The victory didn't erase the hurt. It just meant the hurt hadn't won. Vincent found her there. "Nancy, I want you to know, we have a zero-tolerance policy for customers like that. I should have intervened sooner. Thank you for handling it with more grace than he deserved." She nodded, straightened her apron, and went back to work. There were still other tables to serve. But the story didn't end there. Someone had filmed the moment Nancy responded in German. By morning, the video had 200,000 views. By the end of the week, it had gone viral, 3 million views. Coverage on local news, articles with headlines like "Waitress's perfect comeback exposes billionaire's cruelty" and "PhD student teaches entitled customer an unforgettable lesson." Aaron Westmore became infamous for all the wrong reasons. His social media accounts went private. His name became synonymous with entitlement and casual cruelty. And his father? Richard Westmore released a brief statement. "My son's behavior was unacceptable and does not reflect our family's values. Effective immediately, his access to family funds has been suspended until he completes a year of service work in community programs and demonstrates genuine growth." Aaron would be washing dishes, cleaning community centers, and serving meals to people he'd once looked down on. The lesson was just beginning.
So, what can we learn from what happened at the Gilded Table that night? First, assumptions are dangerous. Aaron looked at Nancy and saw only what he wanted to see, someone he could diminish to make himself feel powerful. He never considered that the quiet woman refilling his water might be more educated, more accomplished, more worldly than he'd ever be. Second, and this is crucial, service workers deserve dignity and respect regardless of their real story. Nancy didn't deserve kindness because she had a PhD or a diplomat father. She deserved it because she was a human being doing honest work. The barista making your coffee, the person cleaning your office, the driver delivering your food, they all deserve to be treated with basic human decency, full stop. Their worth isn't determined by their job title. Third,
Cruelty says far more about the person inflicting it than the person receiving it. Aaron thought he was exposing Nancy's limitations. Instead, he exposed his own, his insecurity, his need to dominate, his hollowness. And finally, language and education are tools that can build bridges or burn them. The choice is ours. Nancy went on to complete her PhD with honors. Her nonprofit, Community Bridges Foundation, expanded to serve 3 more cities. She still works a service job 1 weekend a month, not because she has to, but because she believes in staying connected to all parts of the human experience. As for the universal truth, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone has a story deeper than what you can see on the surface. What's the most important lesson you're taking from Nancy's story? Drop it in the comments. And if you believe in treating people with dignity, regardless of their job title, subscribe to Gilded Justice Stories for more real-life tales that remind us why character matters more than status. See you in the next one.